Hello everyone. First of all, I hope you are all doing well. My name is Amandanisa Zanati, and today in this video, I would like to present a journal. The title is Language Variation, an analysis of language varieties used by ELL students on social media contexts. This article was written by Ambarwati Emira Putri and Nyoman Jaya Putra, and it was published in 2024 in the Judson Penna English Education Journal. I chose this article because I think the topic is really interesting and also very relevant to our daily lives. Almost all of us use social media every single day, so without realizing it, we're actually exposed to different kinds of language variation all the time. Throughout this presentation, I will explain what the study is about, why the researchers conducted it, the method they used, the main findings, and at the end, I will also share my own opinion about the article before wrapping everything up. So let's get started. Before we get into the details, let me give you a quick overview of the article. Basically, this research looks at how EFL students use different language varieties when they're communicating on social media, especially on Instagram and Facebook. What I found interesting is that the researchers didn't only focus on English. They also looked at how students combine English with Indonesian, local languages, slang, abbreviations, and even Arabic expressions in their post. If we think about it, this is actually something we do quite often. For example, we might post something like capek banget hari ini but I'm so grateful. Or simply write habede instead of happy birthday. We usually don't even realize that these are examples of variation. That's why the researchers wanted to study this phenomenon from a sociolinguistic perspective to understand how and why students choose different language styles when communicating online. Now that we have a general picture of the article, let's take a look at what motivated the researchers to conduct this study in the first place. So now, let's talk about the background of the study. As we all know, social media has become a huge part of our daily lives. Almost everything we do today involves social media, whether it's sharing photos, posting stories, commenting on someone's post, or simply chatting with friends. Because we use social media so often, the way we communicate has also changed. We don't always use formal language anymore. Instead, we mix different languages, use abbreviations, slang, emojis, or even our local language without really thinking about it. For example, we might say something like, "Semangat ya," "Good luck for your presentation," or simply write habede instead of happy birthday. Sometimes we even mix English with Indonesian in the same sentence because it feels more natural. This is exactly what caught the researchers' attention. They realized that language on social media is becoming more diverse, especially among EFL students. That's why they decided to analyze these language variations from a sociolinguistic perspective. After understanding what this research was conducted, let's take a look at what the researchers actually wanted to find out. Basically, the study has three main objectives. First, the researchers wanted to identify the different types of language variation used by EFL students on Instagram and Facebook. Second, they wanted to understand how those language variations are used in different communications contexts. And finally, they wanted to find out what social media factors influence students when choosing certain language styles. So, the study isn't just about identifying different language varieties, it's also about understanding the reasons behind those language choices. To answer those objectives, the researchers came up with three research questions. The first question is, what type of language variation are used by EFL students on social media? Second question, how are those language varieties used on Instagram and Facebook? And the last question is, what social factors influence students' language choices? These questions became the main focus on the research, and every part of the analysis was designed to answer them. Now, the next thing we should look at is how the researchers carried out the study. For this research, the authors used a descriptive qualitative method. Instead of using surveys or calculating statistics, they collected real examples from students' Facebook and Instagram posts. The data were collected through observation and documentation. After gathering the data, they analyzed everything using Miles and Haberman's qualitative analysis model. There are four main steps in this model. The first is data collection. The second is data reduction, where they selected the most relevant data. The third is data display, where the findings were organized so they could be analyzed more easily. And finally, they drew conclusions based on the results. To make sure the findings were reliable, they also applied triangulation by comparing different sources, methods, and theories. Personally, I think this method fits the research very well because the researchers wanted to understand how language is actually used in real life situation, not just collect numbers. Now comes to the most interesting part of the presentation is the finding. After analyzing all the data, the researchers found six types of language variation used by level students. The first one is dialect. Some students still use their regional language, especially the Sumbawanese dialect, in their social media posts. This shows that even though they're communicating online, they still maintain their local identity and culture. The second type is colloquial language. This includes abbreviations such as HBD, which means happy birthday, and Weye ATB, or wish you all the best. These kinds of expressions make communication shorter, quicker, and more casual. And the third type is formal and informal language. The students adjust their language depending on the situation. For example, when introducing themselves for a student organization, they tend to use formal language, but when posting holiday pictures or spending time with friends, they switch to a much more relaxed and informal style. And the fourth type is gender variation. The researchers found that male and female students sometimes communicate differently. In the study, female students tended to post more emotional or motivational captions, while male students were generally more direct in expressing their thoughts. And the fifth type is code switching and code mixing. I think this is probably the easiest one for us to relate to because many of us do it every day. For example, uh, someone might write, hari ini capek banget but I'm really happy. Or they write an Indonesian sentence and end it with thank you, see you, or another English expression. Without realizing it, that's already an example of code switching or code mixing. The last type is slang. Words like best tie and Miss Queen appeared quite frequently in the students' posts. These words aren't considered formal English, but they're very popular among young people because they make conversation sounds more friendly, funny, and relatable. Overall, this finding shows that students don't choose language randomly. Their language choices depend on who they're talking to, what they want to express, and the situation they're in. Personally, I found this part really interesting because I realized that I also use several of these language variations when posting or chatting on social media. Now that we've gone through the findings, I would like to share my own opinion about this article. Overall, I really enjoyed reading this article. One thing I like is that the topic is very close to our everyday lives. As a students, we spend a lot of time on social media, so the examples in this research feel very familiar. Another thing I appreciate is that the researchers used real examples from Facebook and Instagram instead of only explaining theories that made the discussion much easier to understand. However, I think there are still some limitations. The researcher only focuses on Facebook and Instagram, while nowadays many students spend more time on platforms like TikTok, WhatsApp, X, or Threads. Because of that, I think future research could include more social media platforms and involve more participants from different backgrounds. That way, the result would be even more comprehensive. Even with those limitations, I still think that this article provides a good understanding of how language continues to develop in today's digital world. Finally, I would like to end this presentation by summarizing the main points of the study. To sum up, this research shows that able students use different language varieties depending on the context, the people they communicate with, and the purpose of their communication. Social media gives students the freedom to be more expressive and creative when using language. This study also reminds us that language is constantly changing. As technology develops and people interact in different ways, language naturally evolves as well. So, language variation isn't something unusual. Instead, it's a normal part of communication in today's society. Before I finish my presentation, I would like to leave you with three questions for discussion. First, why do you think students use different language varieties on social media? Second, which type of language variation do you use most often in your daily communication? And the third, do you think code switching makes communication more effective, or can it sometimes cause misunderstanding, and why? I would be happy to hear your opinions. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer any questions. Well, that's all I would like to share in today's presentation. Thank you so much for listening and for your attention. I hope this presentation gives you a better understanding of how language variation appears in our everyday communication, especially on social media. If you have any question or comments, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.